Ready? Yes, sir. Okay, great. Okay, Sheriff Greg Champagne, St. Charles Parish Sheriff's Office. With me, I have St. Charles Parish Public Schools Superintendent Ken Ortling. And let me say first that I again want to reemphasize what a great, constant, ongoing working relationship that my office has with St. Charles Parish Public Schools. We are heavily invested in each other. In fact, we are adding resource officers to the cadre of officers that we already have in high schools, junior highs, and we're extending some to middle schools, in addition to the DARE officers, and some ad hoc patrols watching the elementary schools. We're expanding that in the interest of public safety, and most importantly, the safety of our school children. So we're here today. We sent out a release, and we arrested two women earlier this week. First is Marta Gutierrez Serrano, who is the, wait, I'm confused. Let me, so yeah, that's the 28-year-old woman who entered Hahnville High School as a student, and her mother, I believe, is 46. Marta Serrano Alvarez, so they have the same first name. And both were charged with injuring public records. Injuring public records is basically submitting a false or counterfeit record to the government for official use in an attempt to gain something of value out of it. The reason we decided to speak today to the public is basically we've gotten a lot of concerns. Obviously, this is somewhat unusual situation. I've always said, I've seen everything. Well, pretty much, we haven't seen everything. So this is something different. This is something new. It's not the crime of the century. And I thought we owed it to our public, who has asked a lot of questions, and rightfully so. If you've got kids in the school system, you want to know why is a student there who's literally 10 years older than the rest of the students. And so that's a legitimate question, and we'd like to kind of explain all of that, and hopefully we can put the minds of our parents at ease on this situation. So from the Sheriff's Office standpoint, Monday, May the 9th, we were notified, in fact, I was called personally by Superintendent Ortling, that he wanted to meet, that they had an issue with a student potentially being overaged. I don't know if that's the right word, but much older than is allowed for a student to be enrolled at a public high school. And so we did, in fact, meet, and immediately I turned that over to my detective bureau to do an investigation. We were provided with basically a birth certificate from the country of Honduras, which indicated that the student in question was 17 years old. The school system had done a preliminary investigation, and that they had determined, literally within a day and a half of receiving the tip that in fact the student was overaged, determined that it was quite likely that the birth certificate was counterfeit or doctored, or a false birth certificate. So we got that information from them. The student had been at Hahnville High School, I believe, since the beginning of last school year. And we, in fact, verified that the birth certificate was not legitimate, that it was falsified, made to look like this young lady, 28 years old, was in fact 28 years old, and she was not 17. So it was a falsified birth certificate, a copy of which looked just like a real birth certificate on its face. And I think Superintendent Ortling will discuss in a few minutes the fact that the school system, whether you're a U.S. citizen, a foreign national, some type of immigrant, no matter what status, students are entitled to enroll in our public school system, and we have to provide them with an education. And inquiring about their immigration status is not done. We don't do it in law enforcement. In fact, we can't do it. We can't, if we arrest someone, we can't ask an inmate that we've arrested what country they're from and what's their immigration status. So that's been determined by the courts to be off limits, and so we have to treat everyone equally. So the school system did that. The student was at Hahnville High School for a year. I have seen a photograph of her. The mother had been in the United States for a number of years and actually had a visa status at some point, which was expired, which is not unusual. Visas expired and people overstay their visa in large numbers. But the student herself came into the United States late in the fall of 2021. I saw a photograph of her taken by the government, processing photo, before she was released into the country. And I can tell you, I haven't seen the lady in person, but she could very easily be taken for a young teenager, without a doubt. We cannot release mugshots or photographs, the photograph I referred to, because under the act of the legislature last year, there's only certain violent crimes we can do that, so we can't release a photograph. But I can tell you, I saw the photograph, and she looked to me like a young teenager. So I'm not surprised at all that, based upon appearances alone, she was certainly accepted at face value for the age that the falsified birth certificate said. The big question from parents is now, oh, what's the purpose of this? Why was she doing it? Is there something nefarious? Well, the answer to that is, based upon everything that we know, the answer is no. She was in school. She minded her own business. She did her schoolwork. She caused no trouble. She was not a disciplinary problem. She violated no laws in the community that we had to deal with her. As far as we know, she did nothing inappropriate at all, merely attended school. The information we got about the reason for her doing this was simple. She wanted to learn English. She wanted to become proficient at English. She was placed in the 9th grade, and I don't want to take all your information away, because without grade transcripts, that's where the school system places students, because they have to go through the full curriculum if they're indeed working for a high school diploma. So the answer is no. We have no information that there was any nefarious purpose other than the young woman wanted to become proficient in English and perhaps further her education, which I think we can all be sympathetic with. Unfortunately, whether it was her decision or her mother's decision, it's certainly bad judgment to submit a falsified document to the government in support of what you're trying to do. And unfortunately, that's a crime, whether you're a foreign national, whether you're a U.S. citizen. A 29-year-old cannot present a falsified document and try and enroll in an American high school. So that was not a good decision. But other than that, we have no information that there was any devious or nefarious purpose other than the fact that she wanted to learn English. There are other options available, we would say, for people in those circumstances. Everyone should get an education. There are ESL programs available. There are GED programs available. They may not have been as convenient as a public high school 2 miles away, but those options are available. Certainly, that is a much better option than falsifying an official government document. So that's the extent of it. As again, I indicated, it's not the crime of the century. I wanted to assure the public, and I know the superintendent does as well, we're not here to bang on these people. I mean, the purpose of getting an education, learning English, is something we want everybody to do. But you can't defraud the government, and you can't enroll in a school if you're 10 years over the age that is allowed to be. So that was a bad decision, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Ertling for a few comments, and then we'll take a few questions, but we don't want to go on and on about this. We just merely wanted to provide an explanation for the many questions, and understandably so, speculation that we're receiving. Dr. Orland.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again, Sheriff, and the St. Charles Parish Sheriff's Office for supporting us during this particular situation. St. Charles Parish Public School System established policy and procedures for student enrollment that are aligned to Louisiana state law. As previously mentioned, during the 22-23 school year, an individual submitted documents for the enrollment of her daughter at Hahnville High School. Our school system has built a safe and supportive environment for all stakeholders to report incidents and/or concerns. At the end of May, it was reported to school administration that a female student enrolled at Hahnville High School was older than the maximum allowed age at Hahnville High School. Upon this notification, we began an internal investigation and discovered documents presented at the time of enrollment may have been fraudulent, and therefore immediately notified the Sheriff's Office. As a result of this discovery, we are conducting an audit of enrollment documents for students currently enrolled in St. Charles Parish Public Schools. We are reviewing student enrollment policy and procedures, and we will make enhancements based upon that review. Moving forward, the school system will provide additional required training for school and district level employees focused on recognizing signs of potentially fraudulent documents. Additionally, it's my sincere hope that this particular incident will bring an awareness to school systems in Louisiana and throughout our country the need to review and enhance their student enrollment processes. In closing, I'd like to thank Sheriff Greg Champagne, the St. Charles Parish Sheriff's Office, and our community as we continue to prioritize the safety, security, and well-being of our students and our employees. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sheriff Champagne, and once again, thank you, Sheriff.
Thanks, Dr. Ortling. So again, we'll take a few questions, but I'm asking you, we don't want to beat this thing to death. So if you got any really relevant questions, we don't want to go blow by blow of every day by day. I think we've given you the gist of the story, no inappropriate behavior, et cetera. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question more about the tip that it came in. Did that come from other students, parents in the school system?
We don't want to, no, we don't want to get into who tips off. It was a tip, and it turned out to be true, and they investigated it and got to the bottom of it within a day and a half.
We mentioned you guys are doing kind of an audit of the current documents and reviewing the procedures. What are your current policies and procedures for enrolling students and looking at these documents?
That's a good question.
It's pretty much as most other school systems. We have a set of board policy and procedures that require certain documentation. When a student enrolls in a public school in Louisiana, you're required to follow certain procedures relative to that. Those are aligned to what we call Bulletin 741, which is aligned to state law. It provides requirements for schools to enroll. So some of those things require birth certificates and/or proof of residency based on where the student resides in whatever parish that they may reside in. So all of our policy and procedures were aligned to law, and the protocols that were followed were also aligned to those same procedures.
You mentioned also the audit. It looks from their Facebook page that she has additional children, maybe 2 boys, who may have attended and graduated from Hahnville. Are you going back and checking to see whether their documents were accurate as well, if they were the appropriate age?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a review of all student enrollment documents. So, yeah, all student enrollment documents. So it could possibly include previous enrollment documents as well. But I really don't want to go into too much detail because some things are still open to investigation, as well as the privacy of student records aligned to FERPA. So I really don't want to talk about other students and/or documents that are within the school system.
For the sheriff, a charge related to injuring the public record, how much time are they looking at?
It's a relative felony. We refer to it. I think it's a 5-year possible sentence. I mean, anybody who submits a fraudulent document to the government, that's injuring public records. So it's the sentence of that. I believe it's maximum 5 years with or without labor.
You mentioned the mom.
And I don't submit or suggest in any way that should be at all the punishment here. In fact, I don't think so.
You mentioned the mom was here previously on a visa that had expired. Was the daughter here on a visa as well? Do we know anything about that?
She was not on a visa, no. She entered the country in New Mexico back in the end of 2021 and was processed. She came in and was processed by the government.
Does the nature of this charge make her or her relatives susceptible to deportation because of false
You'd have to ask the Department of ICE, Immigration, Customs Enforcement about that, but I don't really know.
But you all are saying that the daughter was in this country legally?
She came across the border and in 2019 and was processed by the government in late 2019. As they do, they photograph people, they take information, and then they release them into the country.
Okay, so legally.
You gave 2 dates. You said 2019 and then the end of 2021.
I wouldn't, yeah, well, that's kind of a loaded question, obviously, because there's other issues here, and I didn't want to turn this at all into, a debate about the immigration system here, because, people claim asylum. I don't even want to go there. That's for another day. If you want to come in and talk to me about my general views on immigration, we can talk about that. But I don't want to do that here. That's not.
I have a clarification question. She had been in school for 1 school
As the sheriff mentioned earlier, when you don't have supporting documentation for a particular grade, a student progresses through high school with earned credits. So the age, based on the birth certificate, would have placed that student potentially in ninth grade based on the lack of information received for a transcript.
I guess for the sake of the story, do we call the student an immigrant? Do we say the student was living in this country legally? Because we don't want to say she wasn't here legally if she indeed was.
You would have to address that to the Department of Immigration. She was processed and released into the country by the U.S. government. I'm not going to put a label on that. I mean, I got my own thoughts on the overall system, but that's not really relevant for this here.
Okay.
She was committing no law by violating no law by being here. Circumstances of many millions of people coming across the border, we got obviously concerns about that. And that's a whole legal debate for another day. That's the whole asylum thing and everything else.
I'm not going there either.
Yeah, okay, I didn't want to do that.
Superintendent, is there any, you mentioned, she wanted to learn English and further her education. Is there any support maybe to show the family kind of, here's how you can get a GED, or is there support for other, maybe Spanish-speaking people in this community that you guys say, hey, here's a better route that we can go?
That's exactly what I said, yeah.
Yeah, just like the sheriff mentioned, there are routes. I mean, within our school system, we have a great EL program for students that don't speak English. There's an appropriate way to enroll in our public school system, which is one of the best school systems in the state. So we're certainly very proud of the services that we do provide. You just have to do it the right way. So in regards to reaching out to the family, of course, this is still in the process of an investigation, so we're really not communicating currently with the family.
I've got one too, sir. Is there any kind of reprimand happening to whoever processed this document in the first place?
As I mentioned before, we followed our policies, which are aligned to law, and procedures, our school board policy and procedures. So I'm not going to mention anything relative to personnel or the investigation itself. But we're confident that we followed what we had in place.
Can you say anything about what kind of student she was? Was she engaged with clubs? Was she academically excelling?
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to it earlier, but we've been advised by counsel because that is somewhat linked to student record, and that's protected under FERPA, so I'd rather not comment on that. So, thank you.
Does that protect her student record or other student records?
In general,
In general, we don't, as I've mentioned before, FERPA protects the Family Educational Rights Protection Act, I believe, protects student records, whether it's the student we're mentioning today or any student enrolled in our school. So we're not going to mention anything about something that may be linked to a potential student record, which could include activities that they belong to, their grade, discipline records, so on and so forth.
That act would still protect her even though she wasn't allowed to be a student in the public school system?
Well, she's innocent until proven guilty. So as of right now, she's a student. We brought a criminal charge, but everybody's innocent until proven guilty. So that's a policy they have, and they don't talk about it. I mean, they don't talk about it for anybody. The information we have is the young lady caused no problems. She did nothing inappropriate with any other students, kept to herself, went home, and didn't engage in any other criminal or inappropriate behavior. And I think that really covers it all. We don't want to, again, I'll take one more. I don't want to beat this thing to a pulp.
I was checking the jail records. Have they been booked? Is there any bond assigned yet? Just kind of logistics at this point.
They're adults, and they were booked, and I believe there's a $30,000 bond. Now, $30,000 doesn't, you can post a 10% cash bond in St. Charles Parish, so really it's a $3,000 cash bond. And they were released quickly, so I think they were both released within hours and got out on bail. So that's it. Bottom line, it was bad judgment to falsify records. We certainly are sympathetic and understand the need and desire for young people to want an education and become proficient in our language. It's a key to success here, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. So again, I'm going to reemphasize, the main point of us talking today was to assure our public that the other kids were in no danger. There was nothing that occurred inappropriately or illegal other than the falsified documents, and it'll now go through the court system, and we'll see what happens. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Amanda.